Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and in tonight's lesson, we're going to cover the first half of the 18th chapter of Proverbs, a chapter of 24 verses. We're going to cover the first 12, but what we've been doing is dividing these chapters in half, so we're going to review the final half of the 17th chapter, also 28 verses, so we're going to begin at verse 14, our review. The beginning of strife is like releasing water, therefore stop fighting before it breaks out. Nip it in the bud, because violent confrontations have a way of gaining inexorable momentum, because if the way that the world thinks is that once someone else punches you in the face, your goal and objective is to smash them into smithereens. Our goal and our objective, and Christians in such a situation, is to turn the other cheek. But this is just a comment on human nature, and a lot of us couldn't do that in such a scenario. But that is the exalted ethic we are called to. But conflicts are preventable, so stop it before it breaks out, because far easier and efficient to stop a violent confrontation before it starts than to after it starts. After it starts, you just get tangled and you end up getting elbowed in the face, and just all these horrible things happen precisely because you did not nip it in the bud. Conflicts are avoidable and they are preventable, and it takes wisdom to know how to navigate through situations and avoid them. Verse 17, a friend loves at all times, and a brother is born for adversity. This is the most exalted uplifting of the dynamic of brotherly relations. That is the reason that we are born. We are born, if one of us is sick, that means we are right there sick with them. If one of us is in pain, if one of us is depressed, if one of us is lonely, if one of us broke up with their girlfriend, anything at all, anything that causes or stimulates adversity, a brother in such a situation is a very present help in need. And the nature of friend is to love at all times. Friends will feign love to get what they want from you, but a real friend you will know by the endurance of their friendliness. And in the first verse we read in the chapter we're going to cover, to read the opposite of a friendly person. He also says, don't become a guarantor to your friend in the 18th verse. Such a friend is not worth having. A friend who loves at all times very much is. 19th verse, he who loves transgression loves strife. He who exalts the door seeks destruction. The love of transgression or sin and strife is sin in itself, but it is more than that. It is rooted in the sinful mindset, the reprobate mind, which makes this behavior possible and acceptable. Romans 1:28. But if you live by the sword, you seek your own certain self-destruction. The moral law of cause and effect in the New Testament is he who lives by the sword dies by the same. So stay away from conflict, stay away from sin, because sin leads to strife. It invites violence in your life, and or injury to your life, shall we say. Verse 24, we're going to skip a bunch. Wisdom is before the face of an understanding one, but the eyes of the fool are on the ends of the earth. As I've explained, the tripartite hierarchy of levels of intelligence is knowledge is at the foundation. That's the bottom level. That consists of knowing the facts. Understanding is the mid-level tier. It understands the underlying causes and connection within the facts. Knowledge knows that something is true. Understanding knows why something is true. And at the top of this is wisdom, whose relationship is best explored to the foundation. If knowledge is the ability to pick apart the puzzle pieces analogous to items of information, wisdom is the ability to arrange it in a coherent picture, and it has the widest visionary and panoramic view, exponentially above knowledge and multiplied above that of understanding. So, of course, one who has understanding, now one can be wise and understanding and knowledgeable, but one cannot be wise without being understanding and knowledgeable. So, of course, wisdom, all understanding people are not necessarily wise, but all wise people are understanding. Hence, you will find wisdom not necessarily always, but only on the face of the one who has understanding. But the antithetical juxtaposition we read of the wise and the understanding, now their antithesis, the fool, is presented, and Solomon has plenty to say about the wisdom and foolishness. Wisdom literature does treat its antithesis with through the lens of wisdom, and it just shows the self-defeating nature, self-destructive nature, the abject folly of the way of the fool, the mindset of the fool, the behavior of the fool. A fool in the Bible is not necessarily one who is so much mentally deficient, more morally so. So their eyes are on the end of the earth. Now this is where we as disciples need to be, because what do we read in the Great Commission? We are to take this message to the ends of the earth, but not in the sense that the eyes of the fools are on the ends of the earth. The earth is his territory. The fool lives in the world. They're worldly people, and there's so much foolishness in the world, which is why the world is one of our enemies. Not just because they hate us, but because their values are alien and antithetical to our own. He who has knowledge spares his words, and a man of understanding is of a cool spirit. So remember the tier, knowledge and understanding, and at the foundational level of knowledge consists in not the knowledgeable one does not suffer from the same odd compulsion of the fool. Verbosity, tragically and ironically, is the quality and characteristic of the fool, and this is tragic because those who have the least to say the most. But the knowledgeable will not suffer from the same foolishness is self-advertising by nature. Knowledge does not suffer from the same odd compulsion to let everyone in the room know how knowledgeable they are. And understanding, that's the next level, below wisdom and above knowledge. Understanding, you can always tell an understanding one by one who is cool of spirit. That means calm, composed, collected. They have it all together. They do not get excited over trivial matters or allow their passions to degenerate into violence. They have a spirit of coolness. Even a fool keeping silence is regarded as wise, as understanding as when he closes his lips. Now the gender distinction is not exactly identifiable, but I can think of no greater human example of this principle than Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. No human being on the face of the earth demonstrates how much of an abject idiot they are every time they open their yap. She would do well to stop talking, listen, learn, and think about what you say before you say it. So she would certainly look wiser if she would learn to shut her yap. But understanding, if you close your lips, you at least look, because the wise tend to listen more than speak. 18th chapter, first verse, lesson itself. The separatist seeks self-desire. He breaks out against all sound wisdom. Separatist is alternately translated as the unfriendly one. Remember the 17th verse of the antecedent chapter. But a separatist is an isolationist. They look out for number one. This is the isolation of individuals. You separate yourselves from relationships because it's all about you. So much so that the pursuit of your own self-interest, your own the deranged whimsies of your hearts, which form your desires, are all self-oriented, and the cause and effect consequence of this self-seeking is the abandonment of all sound wisdom, all common sense. Wisdom does combine common sense with profound understanding, but you are so the separatist is to be a separatist or an isolationist or an individualist is therefore to rebel against wisdom, which is the aim and objective that wisdom literature is trying to instill in its readers. So in other words, don't look out for number one, don't be so selfish. And Satan fell because he wanted something for himself rather than God. He wanted to change one word in the Lord's Prayer, mine instead of thine. He wanted to be able to say, mine is the power in the kingdom and the glory forever. Amen. But when we trace human rebellion back to God, the same selfish motive emerges in us as in him. So we can't point the finger at Satan because we do the same thing. We are rebels by nature. We break out against the sound wisdom of God just by, the old natures doing jumping jacks and trying to get back in. So we have to stay grounded and really pursue meaningful and uplifting relationships, and understanding can flourish in such scenarios as a relationship. Understanding is an intensely personal quality. one who we speak of a good friend as one who understands us, not one who knows us. A fool does not delight in understanding, but in uncovering his own heart. Fool has no appetite to enhance his knowledge, to even reach the level of understanding. That is not something fools do. That's not the way they're wired. They have different appetites, different drives, different desires. They are driven by foolishness rather than wisdom, and wisdom would know to keep their mouth shut and not express every secret that's protruding in your heart at the moment. You do not have to tell everyone in the room what what your selfish human heart. The heart is three things according to Jeremiah 17:9. It is deceitful, it is wicked, not only wicked but desperately so, and it is incomprehensible. Who can understand it? So don't trust your heart. Don't go with your heart. Christians are called to think with our minds, not with our hearts. God gave us minds for a reason. The heart is how Satan tries to get in, and often does. When a wicked one comes, scorn comes too, and with shame reproach. These two things follow these, or actually it's a chain reaction domino effect. So from wickedness comes, scorn follows the wicked, much in the same way that reproach is the chain connection between shame. What begins in shame ends in reproach, much in the same way that wickedness leads to scorn. Scorn is to be a figure of fun, a proverb, object of ridicule. So wickedness, you're just embarrassing yourself if your wickedness is exposed. And, hopefully that can instill the wicked into some shame, and maybe the reproach can compel them to repent. But shame and guilt are good. Guilt functions for us in the equivalent capacity that pain does to the body. We know not to touch fire because the pain that we feel when our skin touches the fire, much in the same way that guilt prevents us from doing things that felt good at the moment but leave us dirty inside after. The words of a man's mouth are deep waters. The fountain of wisdom is a flowing stream. That deep waters figure appears also in 25. It means one of two things, profound or obscure. He's talking about depth. We can also read that verse. It's not immediately visible on this page, but you can turn there while I comment on this. So the words of the wise, they have a lot to say, even though they do not say a lot. You should listen to them when they speak implicitly, because they're deep waters, deep wells. There's going to be no shortage of abundance of water, which is spiritual nutrients, metaphorically. And the fountain of wisdom, it just exudes. So these aquatic analogies, waters, fountains from which flow streams, these are three sources of water, three manifestations. So in the 4b, as distinct from 4a, we witness the deep water turn into a stream. It is not good to show partiality to the wicked, or to turn aside the righteous in right ruling. Partiality in general is not good. Partiality is a sin forbidden by the law of Moses, and because it is inconsistent with the divine nature as expressed in Deuteronomy 1:17. That's why they're commanded in 10:17 not to exercise partiality in their judgments. Partiality is prejudice. That's embracing something without even knowing the facts. Not even having the investigative integrity to assess the worth of what you are pursuing or the one you are vouching for. So especially don't be partial to the wicked. This is an inversion and a corruption and a perversion of justice. The wicked deserve to be punished, but partiality can let them off the leash and let them free to do their wickedness. And if someone's walking the straight and narrow, you don't want them to repent of that path. So do not turn aside the righteous and right ruling. He's also speaking of justice and judgment, and of course the righteous, they should be rewarded in the courtroom. Realistically and tragically, the corruption of the human nature makes it a fact of life in just about any society. We are certainly no exception. where the wicked are rewarded and the righteous punished. And it's going to be like that in the tribulation, which there's going to be tribulations before the tribulation, and we are not quite there yet. A fool's lips enter into strife, and his mouth calls for blows. Fools, they fall into the trap of their own conflict, and the avenue through which they fall is through their lips. Their lips lead them straight into strife, the things we are told to avoid in the 14th verse of the previous chapter. Strife leads to nowhere good, and so of course the fool is gonna they're gonna let their mouth write a check that their body can't handle. So they're calling for people to beat them up just because they are so foolish and so stupid and so imprudent with their choice of words that people want to hurt them. How foolish is that? A fool's mouth is his ruin, and his lips are the snare of his life. The mouth is the sure road to self-destruction for the fool. So if a fool could only learn to keep their silence, as we read in the 28th verse of the preceding chapter, then they could avoid their own certain self-destruction. But it's their mouth that gets them in trouble. They just can't help it. And if we have to take our salvation seriously, as the Savior warned us, is if your right hand offend thee, cast it off. Better to enter the afterlife as a maimed saint than a healthy sinner. So if your mouth is going to lead to your irrevocable self-destruction in hell, cut out your tongue if your tongue causes you to sin. So foolishness get themselves into sinful trouble because of their sinful speech, and wisdom literature has much to say about the correctness or lack thereof of speech according to the standards of wisdom and language and conversation et al., etc. The words of the slanderer are like delicacies, and they go down in the inner part of the hearts. He's talking about gossip. That's what people do in gossip. They make what would be libelous claims in courts of law. It is to bear false witness is the commandment that gossip. That commandment is more extensive than lying alone. It is also gossiping. When you say you heard something, you are giving false witness to something you have not seen. And great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, base minds discuss people. So get your mind out of the gutter. Get your language. If you see gossip in your presence, don't reciprocate the gossip. At worst, maybe smile and not give them much more encouragement than that. But don't feed the fire, because it has potentially irreversible corruption. I hate to say it, but so many people are addicted to gossip. They literally controls themselves, and they can't help it. So the fool feeds on gossip. This feeds their inner parts. So the fool has appetites and desires which they desire to gratify through sinful ways. And gossip is a sin. It is a violation of the 9th commandment. It's something we all do. Gossip is, I barely gossip, but I still do it from time to time. But that is no excuse or example for you to emulate. Also, he who is slack in his work is a brother of a master destroyer. We read the word brother in the 17th verse, which is the most famous, often repeated passage from the 17th chapter. But to be a brother, so idleness and destruction are closely connected. Idleness is not the absence of activity. It is activity geared to no constructive purpose. So when you are idle, when you are lazy, when you are indolent, you invite destructive influences in your life which do not need an invitation to show up, but they do nevertheless because of your lax attention to inertia does not exist. You are either progressing or you are degenerating, in your spiritual health. And we also witness this principle in action in the story of how Solomon came to be born. David's outstanding sin with Bathsheba, who was the mother of Solomon, originally the wife of Uriah, a romantic rival who, after David seduced his wife, committed adultery with her, invited up to her palace, and had sex with her, and she happened to be taking the menstrual cycle wash when he spotted her from her palace, and that's what caused him to send his messenger to invite him up. So she was ripe for conception, and of course she is pregnant, and Uriah is one of the 30, the mightiest valiant warriors in David's army. He was a Hittite, a foreigner, but he served David loyally. Nevertheless, he was a faithful soldier, so faithful that he could not be enticed, even when David got him drunk, to sleep with his wife, because how could he do that when the men in the field are not with their wives? He sleeps outside, and so he proves to be a more honorable man drunk than David is sober. And David, one sin just leads to the next, and it ultimately culminates in the murder of Uriah, which results in David is assured of forgiveness, but he is not spared the consequences of his sin, and rightly so. But it all began because it's springtime, the time when kings normally go to war. David is a warrior king, and even though he is 50 years old at the age of this sin, he does not offer the morale or contribute to the strategy. He just sends Joab, and he stays on the roof of his palace. So he was, for all intents and purposes, derelict in his duty as God's anointed. And the baby born through Bathsheba would die after 8 days. And one of the possible translations of Solomon's names in the Bible always mean something, is compensation or replacement. So Solomon would be the child born of them through their marriage, whereas the child born of adultery was killed. But Solomon ultimately ended up inheriting the throne because Bathsheba would have been David's favorite wife. There was no uniform institutional mechanism for a king naming their successor. Solomon named his eldest born son, who was 41 years old, Rehoboam, when he ascended the throne. But David and Rehoboam both selected the eldest born son from their favorite wives. And Solomon had more wives than any of them combined. Though Rehoboam may have sired more. Yeah, he has the record for number of children sired. The name of Yahweh is a strong tower. The righteous run to it and are safe. So a strong tower, that image, it's quite a word picture. Actually, it's a militarily might. So Yahweh is a warrior, and he protects those who belong to him. And the source of security is found in the name of Yahweh. He is literally as close as the mention of his name. Names are more than mere names, indicating who a person is, but also what they are. So Yahweh's name translates as I am that I am. He is eternally self-existent. He is the Alpha and the Omega. He was in the beginning, from the beginning, and before the beginning. And he is also eternal. That means without limit or end. Infinite and eternal in all his attributes. But the righteous know where to run, whereas the rich man's wealth is in his strong city, verse 11. And like a high wall, his own imagination. The rich man's source of security and satisfaction is not God. God is the money of many rich people. The Bible's not against rich people. Solomon had more money than anyone in the world, yet he had the healthy perspective of money. He had his orders in priority. He valued his wisdom, and at this stage in his life, his relationship with God above all the wealth. He knew that it was all an illusion, just a figment of the imagination, the strength of the security that riches provide. And he comments on this quite extensively in Ecclesiastes. He is disturbed by the anxiety that this son of mine who did not work for what I have earned is going to get everything, and he's probably going to squander it away. And the accuracy of this anxiety did not take long to fulfill. So even if you die with your fortune intact, you can't take any wealth with you. Thus, riches are no source of eternal security. So it is all an imagination. People who worship money as God are looking to the wrong God. God with no metaphysical substance save in their own imagination. Before destruction, the heart of a man is haughty, and before esteem is humility. So this word before also appears in the 14th verse. Stop fighting before it breaks out. And this is a similar sequence of chain reaction, cause and effects. So haughtiness precipitates destruction. Haughtiness is at the root cause, the moral motivator of destructive activity, conflict that leads to destruction. It all begins with a haughty spirit, but conversely, the superiority of the superior way is made self-evident through the contrast. So, similar cause of chain reaction. If you want to be esteemed and honored and gloried, you have to have humility. New Testament, he who humbles himself shall be exalted, and he who exalts himself shall be humbled. So that paradox, the same order is parallel in the paradox. Humility is the root of true esteem, and Solomon was great, but he was remarkably humble for a man as great as he was. That's all the time we have for today. We'll pick up this sometime soon. Take care until then. I'll see you before then. Bye-bye.